would like to ask the panelists, please put it into the Slido app. Jordana, you might want to flash up that QR code again, just in case. But my next question is going to Paul and Reynaldo. So, we touched on this topic of a common taxonomy for InfraTech, which, when you consider sort of the vast sort of landscape of different technological solutions, even when you're considering just one kind of outcome, for example, reducing emissions from buildings, for example, you could do everything from solar panels all the way through to AI technology. So, how do you navigate through that landscape, given that there isn't a common taxonomy, and whether it's even possible to have a common taxonomy across that kind of broad range of technologies? How do you actually go about navigating through that landscape? And Paul, we'll start with you on that one.
Thank you very much. I think from my side, I looked at it in a rather simple way. You could look at by verticals, by sectors. That will certainly help you to address stuff like hydrogen, and in transport, you can look at electrical vehicles. And then the second way of looking at it is by technology solutions families, which allows you to look at potential investment opportunities in AI, in drones, and etc. That really helps on the development sides, on the upstream sides. But what I feel the most important in terms of thinking about the taxonomy is also to look at infrastructure projects from a life cycle perspective, which allow you to look at the cross-cutting technologies like digital twins, looking at how we can use digital technologies to improve the constructions and the planning processes. How can we look at smart contracts in the procurement processes? And those processes are cross-sectoral and cross-technologies. But last but not least, I think the fourth dimension that how you can cut this taxonomy is really by themes and by the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. That will be really important because most of us, the speakers today, including myself, we look at it from an infrastructure perspective. But we certainly need to understand that when we are investing into the technologies, the funding of the development of these technologies are looking at some sort of market sizing as well as a return profile. And the venture capitalists as well as the corporate investments are really behind this. And therefore the taxonomy is really important because if we can't get the taxonomy correct, then the investors cannot work because neither the strategic committees of a large corp, which determines the investment's directions, nor the venture capitalists, when they go into their investment committees, they can't justify any capital allocation to these sectors investing into these technologies. I'll give you a very simple example to stop and then I'll finish. If you look at some of the AI technologies and you're trying to tell them, look, in the tunneling situations, you could actually use a lot of cameras and with AI that you can replace a lot of manual inspections and looking at all those wave diagrams. And that will save 10 times of the money. While the applications is sound, none of the technology companies would use the same technologies or their best talent, nor the venture capitalists would put their capital into solving this problem because there isn't enough scale to justify that high return profile that these venture capitalists are looking. So the taxonomy is really important because that bridged the expectation gaps and trying to make sense of the risk profiles and tell the venture capitalists, look, you're not dealing with fintech, you're not dealing with e-commerce, you're dealing with large scale infrastructure projects. You don't necessarily need that types of high triple digit return to justify an investment of a very prudent, economically beneficial solutions. So I think the taxonomy is really important and I try to give in that insight from more the development of technology and how do we catalyze the right capital to fund it. And that's the perspective in mind.
Excellent. That's really interesting. And I guess, Reynaldo, from your perspective, There's probably a taxonomy as well, but I guess from the bottom-up approach that you talked about in terms of developing technology, there must be some kind of aggregation of demand. I guess we're talking about that kind of scale component to investing in technology. How are you addressing that at the moment?
Yeah, to the comments of Paul, I agree completely on the dimensions he mentioned. The vertical dimension of the sectors and horizontally looking at technology. This is, I would say, is the starting point for the taxonomy. I would add the dimension for us, which is very important as a development bank working with 26 countries, as diverse as we work in Brazil and the small islands and the Caribbean, or in countries in Central America. So I would add the dimension of geography and the maturity of the local market, both at the technology standpoint, but also at the sector. Just to give an example, let's say we've been developing solutions for road maintenance, and some countries are pretty advanced in their process for road maintenance, and others are just beginning or they have a big lack of funding. So you need to approach it differently. How you introduce technology in this context? Or to mention another example, in energy, some countries privatized the whole energy sectors, others are still public. So the way you deploy technology in the energy sector might vary significantly in these different contexts. So we look at this as these dimensions as well. And speaking to the bottom-up approach that we are taking at the IDB, as a complement of the bottom-up, the top-down approach that I mentioned, we faced many challenges when we tried to push InfraTech with our client countries, and we ended up having cases where we didn't have the developers locally, or we didn't have enough players to enter the market, or even we didn't have the resources from governments to afford the application. So what we did is we started developing solutions in-house, which is not conventional for us. We are a development bank, but we hired developers, data scientists, and we developed solutions. Then we put as a common Creative Commons license for countries to have access for free, and even we help them to implement. So that was one strategy that is working for us. Of course, it's not our intention to crowd out the market, and some of the solutions, some of the sectors, some of the technology that we see that the market is responding, we just leave it. So that's pretty much what we're approaching right now, and we hope that when we connect this, Monica, with the top-down approach, strategic approach, policy approach that I mentioned before, we're gonna have a much consistent ecosystem for InfraTech, which will be different for different geographies. Like I mentioned, it'll take longer in some cases, but that's the end goal.
Great, thank you, Reynaldo. And we've got another couple minutes left actually, and we have one question online, which is, what is the low-hanging InfraTech solution that can or is being used today? And to answer that question, what we'll do is we'll do a quick fire response from everyone in like literally 3 words. And we'll start with Serdar actually. What are your views? Low-hanging InfraTech solution in 3 words.
I think it's a digital network. It's relatively fast and lower cost to connect consumers to buildings, to generation sources, to weather data, to occupancy, and optimize the system.
Reynaldo?
I would say computer vision and AI. We see standard algorithms available. We see many small companies able to develop it, so I would say that.
Paul?
I would say digital twin, drones, and AI.
Great, and Alexandra, you're probably a little bit biased in this respect as well. Is digital twins a low-hanging InfraTech solution?
It's part of it. Actually, I agree with everything that the last three people say. It's all together. It's about sharing data and making better decisions. Digital twins are part of that solution, but only part of it.
And Ralph, hydrogen, low-hanging InfraTech solution?
To a certain extent, yes, but a little bit more complex. And I would go for the lowest hanging fruit, PV power. Start with that, renewable energy, cheapest source for all the economies worldwide scale.
Great. Look, thank you everyone for joining this discussion today on such a great topic. Thank you to the audience, to our panel members. I hope you enjoyed that, and looking forward to continuing the discussion in well, forever, really. So thanks everyone, and yeah, feel free to reach out if you want to discuss further.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.